Mom, stop texting me. I'm podcasting. Those are my magazines. Don't touch them. I meant they're not my magazines. Show them back.
Welcome back to the Chasing Tone podcast. I'm Brian, here with Max and Anthony again from Texas Blues Alley. Yes. Check it out if you haven't checked it out yet. You got to if you love blues stuff.
It's where all the guitar slingers go.
It is. So today we talk about...
That's terrible. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Today we talk about what Stevie Ray Vaughan would do tonally if he was still alive, and what he would have continued doing from the point that he died. And we also talk about what kind of pick to pick.
And how to hold it.
Brad Barber writes in, I've always wondered that if SRV was alive today, what direction would he have gone tonally, if in any at all?
So the question is, if Stevie Ray Vaughan were still alive, I was expecting him to ask what direction would he have gone musically. That's a different
Everybody
topic.
knows he'd have been a chicken picker.
Yes.
With a Telecaster.
That's the reason. That's the direction he was going.
Everyone knows that.
But this question was, where would he have gone musically? Mm-hmm. And so, of course, this is all speculation. Nobody can say that for sure. But if you look at his trajectory, so, Max, you might have to help me with this. Obviously, his last studio album was In Step.
Yeah.
The album before that, which came first, Soul to Soul or the live album?
I thought Soul to Soul did.
Yeah, okay. So Soul to Soul was the previous album.
Correct.
To In Step. So in Soul to Soul, I can't remember exactly, but there's a fair amount of straight-ahead blues stuff. On In Step, the biggest difference was In Step was the only album he put out while he was 100% off drugs, like he was clean. And the song structure and orchestration is notably, I wouldn't say more complex, but it's more thoughtful on the In Step album.
Very much so.
Part of that, I think, is because I think he was writing more stuff with Doyle Bramhall during that album. His tone on that album got a lot more complex than it had been on previous albums. And if you read the stories of what it was like recording the In Step album, he had somewhere in the ballpark of 30 amps, I believe. For real.
There's a picture
And
of it somewhere.
he would, it was a wall of amps, and he would experiment.
But you're talking about like not 30 amps at one time.
Not all at one time, but
So-
he would have, however many he decided he wanted to play at one time, they would figure out a combined tone from all those amps that was what he was going for. So if you listen to the tone of those songs compared to his earlier stuff, the tones are a lot harder to pin down because you have a combination of clean from one amp, dirty from another. I mean, God only knows what all he was doing with those things, but it's a lot harder to accurately copy those tones than almost anything else. So if you look at the trajectory of where he was going from Soul to Soul to In Step, you know, a lot of things could have happened. He could have discovered some things on In Step that he decided to kind of push the envelope a little bit more. After that, and his tones could have got increasingly complex, or, as you've seen some other people do, kind of reach the end of what he felt was fun, complexity-wise, and just kind of do a retreat back to your origins. Like, I'm just going back to my vibe reverb with tube screamers for an album or something like that.
Right.
Hendrix, this is where I wanted to ask you guys, Hendrix is kind of the same way, where he got really, I don't want to say weird, but he recorded a lot of stuff that was kind of out there, both tonally and musically. And I often wonder, like, not just musically, but also with tone, what do you think Hendrix would have been doing if he had lived, you know, another 30, 40, 50 years?
No clue.
Man, I can't speculate on that. I mean, that's like...
See, Hendrix Brian was
It's
this
like,
guy.
what would happen if Brad Paisley decided that he was going to play just straight up metal?
Yeah.
I don't know. Brad Paisley being the best guitarist alive.
Yes.
Obviously. Because of his use of the G-Bender and the Telecaster.
And the Paisley Drive.
Next to Brent Mason. Yeah, I mean, they're both pretty damn good. Yeah. Anyways, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
But, Max, I know that you were influenced a lot by Stevie
I'm
Ray.
a huge Stevie fan.
when you listen to the Instep album and you think about where he came from tone-wise, what do you see when you think about where he may have gone next after that?
It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, talk about like the wall of amps. Rene Martinez, his guitar player, actually built like a 6-way splitter, so you can run 6 different amps at a time. That was just live. I've read different interviews. He used 2 of those in series in the studio. So in Instep, I think at one point he was using up to 10 different amps at once.
Wow.
Then I read a really cool article. I think Soldano actually made 2 different 100-watt prototype heads for him, and he never received them because he died like 3 weeks before they were finished.
Wow.
So I mean, that's kind of a totally different.
So he was already kind of, there were some things on the horizon right then that he was kind of pushing the envelope.
Yeah, if I remember right, the Soldanos were like tweed covered. I mean, like huge, like basically like his dumbbells, but super high headroom and not a lot of drive behind them. So it would have been really interesting to kind of see where that ended up.
Yeah. So you also got to think about when it was that he died. It was 1990, correct?
Correct.
So what was happening gear-wise around 1990?
Racks. I mean, of course, racks were huge in that era.
So he was he was bucking the trend in the 80s.
Yeah,
because he was going back to real organic.
And then after that, that's when it changed back to Kurt Cobain type stuff. So everybody's like, no, we don't want racks, we want pedals.
Right.
Maybe he would have been like, you know what? I'm going to dive into some rack stuff.
Yeah. Or he could have been like super into like, maybe like, I think what sometimes people forget is that we live in the best era there's ever been for tone right now. I think it's safe to say that
there's a million different choices.
Exactly. That's what, not because the equipment's so much better, but and a lot of times it is because people pay closer attention to
technology
some
gets better.
Exactly. But there's a lot more options. Like there are less steps to getting the tone you want now than there ever have been.
A good example is like pedals, for example.
Yeah.
You did not have 500 different boutique companies or companies in general to buy an overdrive from.
Yeah, back when Stevie was getting his tube screamers modded, they weren't based off of
Keeley.
Exactly. It's like
he wasn't doing the Keeley mods back
exactly. So it could be one of those things where if his tonal goals didn't continue to change out into whatever, the tones that he had always been after, he may have been somebody who had a signature line of effects from somebody because they could give him in a box what he used to use 4 boxes.
Oh, I'm absolutely but then that begs the question: would he have wanted his own line of guitars? Would he have gone the Eddie Van Halen route and been like, I got my guitars, I got my EVH amps, I got I mean, would he have done that? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. Like
it doesn't strike me that way.
Like reading reviews of them, like Cesar Diaz, like when he modded his fuzz pedals, he actually had like 4 different fuzzes depending on what temperature it was of the venue he was playing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because like the germanium resistors would act differently and that sort
Transistors,
of thing.
yeah.
Transistors.
Yeah, germanium.
That's just testing it.
Yes. You passed the test. Good job.
But yes, he seemed like a guy like I was reading his book. Caught in the Crossfire. Yeah. And he was talking about like calling one of his girlfriends up at like 3 a.m. and be like, I just played this awesome Rickenbacker. Like, when he's, so it's like, I could just see him, like, whatever sounded good, whatever he got his hands on.
Right.
I think that's what he played. I don't know if he'd ever, like, would have went to a corporate signature. I think he would just played the junk guitar he found in the pawn shop.
I mean, it strikes me, and you guys are way more into that than I was, but it strikes me as he was more of a guy that he was just playing and just doing what he did. Like, he wasn't so concerned about getting signature anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was more about the end result than the equipment that got him there.
I mean, it didn't matter what was cool at the time or what everyone else was doing. He just did his own thing and didn't really care what anybody else thought.
And of course, this is all speculation. None of us has any idea, so take it for what it's worth. But he left. His last album was kind of, I don't want to say the worst possible ending to his career, but it was a change. Like it was a definite change in direction slightly from what he had done before, both tonally and musically. And it's, when you just start changing direction, it could end up anywhere. So it's kind of, I think that's part of why his legend is so big, is that, he was on a course most of his career, and then at the very end, it veered a little bit this way. And so you're kind of left wondering, well, I wonder what direction he was heading, but you just never know.
Kind of like what you were telling me about Justin Timberlake, as big a fan as you were, right?
Stop it, Ryan.
Maybe that was someone else.
Yeah.
So anyways.
That's all I have to say about that.
I mean, so tonally, It's all speculation.
Who knows?
Yeah.
You definitely would be playing a Wampler, though.
Yes.
And probably some form of a wah pedal.
Greg Nola writes in, ask Anthony about the pros and cons of using the brown part of the pick. And was it hard to get used to?
What people are talking about is I don't focus enough on the picking angle of in my lessons, but when you do happen to see me picking, I will be using the fat corner of the pick as opposed to the peak of the pick like most people.
That's just weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So why is back when I was learning how to play guitar, I was the only person. I mean, I listened to Albert King and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that, but most of what I know how to do, I learned from Stevie Ray Vaughan. And when you're young and impressionable like that, when you hear, oh, Stevie Ray Vaughan did this, well, then you start doing it. And so that's why I started playing this way, because I heard that's how he holds the pick. And I didn't understand why at the time, but I just did it. And I can't remember thinking like, oh, this feels weird, you know, because I hadn't been playing long enough to really have an opinion about how a pick should feel.
You just knew that's the way it should be done.
Exactly. So as it turns out, there are some advantages to doing it this way. So basically, the pointier the part of your pick that's interacting with the strings, the harder it is to get past the string, because it can penetrate into the strings farther and can, I don't want to say get stuck there, but the rounder that curve, the less force that it takes to go over the strings. So it's just a small difference between the pointy end and the fat curve of the pick for most things that you're playing. The real benefit to playing this way is that when you go to do that really fast picking, somebody call it tremolo picking. I don't know why I always called it. I had a term for it I used to call it, but for that, using the pointy end of the pick is not even an option. You're getting stuck on the string. So for that, what I use is actually the flat side of the pick. Not even the fat corner, but the flat side. And then when you're going over the strings, if you angle your pick like this, it slides over the strings much easier than just the pointy side. So when you get into doing that, that's the real benefit of using the fat corner, is because it's literally changing from this to this, from the fat corner to the flat side.
Gotcha.
So what it does tonally, I'm sure there are differences, but that's not why I do it. I do it because that's how I learned, and it turns out that for certain things associated with the Stevie Ray Vaughan style of playing, the flat side of the pick is very beneficial. So I actually have no idea, aside from using this size pick regularly, what do other people do? Like, I know you play a lot of country stuff. Do you use a regular flat pick, or do you use finger picks?
Both.
Or okay,
it depends. So like, if I'm doing like a 90s country thing, which doesn't come up very often, if someone, you know, in the VFW is like, hey, do some Alan Jackson, you know, then I'm like, all right, time to get the finger pick on, you know.
Right.
But for most of the stuff, for the bro country stuff that's going on now, it's just a pick.
Okay.
Because it's basically just rock with a cowboy hat. You know what I mean? Actually, not even with a cowboy hat anymore, but I mean, for the most part, it's just straight up rock chords.
Okay, so you just use a regular pick, pointy end.
For newer stuff, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do any hybrid picking? Do you use any finger?
You know, very small amount.
Okay.
Like for the most part, if it's really more of like if it's a Brent Mason type of thing, then for the most part, I'm finger picking.
Okay.
Just because that's his style. I mean, he
Right.
like, even if he's doing a fast run, it's finger picked. He's not
Right.
alternate picking at all.
And that's not just about how you pick the strings. That has an effect on your tone
That's the
as
sound.
well. Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge part of the sound.
Right.
Yeah. So someone like Brad Paisley he uses, I mean, kind of a combination. He will do some alternate picking. He'll also,
He's got
yeah,
the fingers going there
yeah.
too.
And a lot of guys in Nashville now are doing that too. So
Okay.
but it's a different sound, you know.
Yeah.
Me personally, like, if it doesn't really matter, I actually feel more comfortable just using my fingers.
Oh, really?
So a lot of times I'll take my pick and actually cup it into my hand. While I'm finger
Right.
picking. You know what I mean? So, and like a lot of people, that feels weird. For some reason, it doesn't feel weird.
Is there any stuff you can't play that way? Like, is there stuff?
Yeah, so if it's like a fast run or something, but I can just real quick.
Right.
go like that, and then
It's
put
like
it back
a little
up.
magician's trick there.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm
You're not going to win any awards for that, but it's useful to be able to do.
Now you see it.
You never know. Never say never.
It could be a new category at the Country Music Awards for best
Dumbest
palm to hand pick technique.
That's a new one. That's a new one they're doing this year.
Now, Max, you and I have some of the same influences, and there's some overlap in the kind of music that we play. I'm curious how you hold the pick and what reason.
Sure. I'm actually kind of a combination of both. Talking about big influences for me, Hubert Summerlin was a big influence for me. I never used the pick. Derek Trucks is another one. So I kind of grew up listening to those guys. So I rarely use a pick. If I do, I'm kind of the antithesis of you.
Really?
Mine's super pointy.
I was going to say, you're the polar
Very
opposite of him.
Yeah, so I'm a Tortex. I'm super pointy.
Huh.
So yeah.
Do you use thin or?
It's 0.88 mils, so kind of right in the middle. It's kind of flexible, but still kind of stiff. And so if I do use pick, but I'll use these 2 fingers or these 3 fingers, then I'll just bring it back up if I want to hit strings really, really hard.
Now, when you're finger picking, are you mainly just using your thumb and your index finger
Pretty
to pick
much,
stuff?
I'll grab strings with those 2 fingers a lot.
Right.
Do you use all your fingers?
No. I'll use these 3 max, but I'll use most of my palm just to mute that stuff. But pretty much I'll grab like Sean Costello thing. I'll grab 2 strings with just these 2 fingers.
Right. So it's interesting. Like even though we ended up studying from some of the same guys, your approach to picking was shaped by some of your earliest influences.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
And same with me, even though I ended up listening to a bunch of guys, Stevie Ray Vaughan was my first main influence, which completely shaped how I held the pick. Yeah. And it's like once you get used to it, it's very hard to
go back.
It's very hard to switch to something else.
Oh man, yeah, definitely. Even now for me, it's hard. I never was a very good alternate picker. You know what I mean? So like, even though I grew up in the 80s, like trying to play George Lynchy type stuff, or all that stuff, I sucked at it really bad. Yeah. For some reason, it was always easier for me to finger pick. So, even like now when I try to alternate pick, I can't. I suck at sweeping. I suck at doing any sort of fast run. Yeah. Even legato stuff now.
So I think the moral of the story is like, take it back to the original question, why I hold the pick that way. It's just because that's how I started learning, and there is one kind of narrow case where there's an advantage to using the fat side. But other than that, I say just use whatever feels the most natural to you, because it's more about your technique than the pick.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you have good picking technique, you'll notice a change in tone, and it might be a little bit easier or less easy depending on what pick you use. But your picking technique is more important than how you hold the pick, I think, for most people. So it's like if you're having a limitation, it's not based on not holding the pick the right way, I don't think.
So I'm sure like if I started playing with that round part, it would sound dramatically different, since I never do that.
Yeah, not only because it's a different part of the pick, but also because your familiarity with the feel of the fretboard is based on how you normally hold the pick. Right. And all of a sudden you go from a point like this to a round edge like that, your licks are going to feel different as you play them. Right. And so you're not going to play the same way until you get used to how that pick feels, So it can definitely, I think, have a big impact on your overall sound if you go, fooling around with how you hold the pick.
So have you tried like any other types of picks, like anything more round or anything thicker? I mean,
I have
what's
gone.
Your favorite?
See, this is an Ernie ball heavy, so I don't know the exact thickness of it. I used to use the Dunlop Tortex, whatever 1.0. That was my go-to pick, but I had such trouble gripping them that I used to take a razor blade and score it this way on both sides so that I could actually hold on to it. The problem was, part of the reason you use a 1.0 pick is because it doesn't flex a whole lot. Well, when you go cut a bunch of grooves in the side of the pick, now all of a sudden you can feel it bend a lot. So I eventually discovered that I can just hold on to a glossy pick a lot better than I can hold on. And so that's the primary reason I'm still using these. But I've used picks that are heavier, and I've heard what it does for your sound. And in some sense, it feels easier to get the same amount of intensity with a heavy pick.
Sometimes it's a different thing.
But you lose a little bit of... there's a trade-off, I think, sometimes between pick thickness and sparkle, if that makes sense. Because you switch to a really thin pick, your strings react differently. But a thin pick, I cannot get the strings to do what I want them to do with a pick that flexes too much. So
Have you tried the Hercos that have like the grippy stuff on them?
I have not. And the reason I can't use a lot of those because most of those who have picks that have grippy stuff, it's all designed for somebody that holds the pick at the fat end.
Right.
So like there's a whole category of picks that I can't use because I would flip it around and now you've got this real sticky stuff like catching on your strings there. So
right.
I'm not very. I feel I'm embarrassed even. I'm not very picky about my picks. I'm sorry.
You should be when we get to you.
There was really no way around it, you know. I just use kind of a heavy, glossy pick and hold it backwards, and that's what I'm used to.
And your whole thing is like that's your favorite pick.
Yeah,
right?
actually, Mark McDaniel, if you're listening out of Nashville, Summer NAMM 2015. Hit me to these, and I've never went back.
Oh, what kind is it?
It's a Sharp by Tortex Sharp, 88 mil, but it's like super pointy.
I remember
shredder pick.
When you were a kid, we used to file picks. Seriously, people would file them that way.
So, what do you notice differently about I'm assuming the picks you used before weren't quite as pointy.
Yeah, they weren't quite as pointy. I've noticed just with a pointy pick, it's another pun. It's a sharper attack. No, but seriously, like I have a pretty mid-range heavy hand anyways. I've noticed with a sharper pick, I get a little more higher frequency, a little more high-end attack out of it. So, and right. I have a kind of a soft approach anyways, and that point really helps me dig in. But see, I choke up on my pick quite a bit.
So you don't have much of it flapping around out there.
Yeah, so I don't hold it back here. It's just barely exposed when I choke up on it. So there's not a lot of give behind it.
Okay.
But it's still enough flex where it's comfortable. Doesn't feel like holding a quarter or a biscuit.
So you've changed your favorite pick fairly far into your playing career.
Yeah, for sure. Within the last 2 years, and I'll never. If these go out of business, I will buy every single one of them.
The moral of the story is, if you want to extort Max someday, buy a bunch of those picks and then convince the company to go out of business.
Max, I heard you like tube screamers. Yeah. Have a bunch of picks that you might like. So, all right, so cool.
Yep.
So, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Chasing Tone. If you have any questions, if you're watching YouTube, comment below. And also, make sure you like and subscribe if you're not subscribed to our channel. If you're not subscribed to your channel, you should stop right now and ask yourself why, because that's something you need to do. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you contact us at podcast@wamplerpedals.com. You can always call the office as well and talk to Max. Ask for Max.
Don't call the office. I'm serious. Don't call the office.
He prefers to get the questions about amps.
He does. And ask him about picks. He loves to talk about picks. So for Brian, Max, and this guy here from Texas Blues Alley, join us again this week. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for watching. Mom, stop texting me. I'm podcasting.